Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Industry Matters podcast. I'm Heather Trumm with VGM, and so honored to have Amanda Smithey with us today again. She's from McKesson, and we are recording our fourth session on being successful in the wound care business, and in particular, the surgical dressing market. So today, what we are going to focus on is training your staff, because if your staff is not trained, you are not going to be successful. It's a critical aspect of being successful in the HME market. When we train our staff on wound care, I know that you always talk about kind of the two buckets for training, the internal and external. Let's focus on what's the internal training look like?
Okay. So when I mentioned like internal and external training, the internal is really your staff. So that's really what we're talking about when we say internal. The external is going to be more of your referral sources. And we're going to talk a lot about that in our go-to-market strategy in session 5. So we won't forget about that, but just to kind of think about the different trainings. So really the key focus areas, though, for that internal staff training, there really are 3. And I really highly believe that all of your staff that's going to be involved in the surgical dressing program needs to have the first 2 key focus areas. It's not different depending on their position or anything like that. I just think that these 2 are the ones that everybody needs. And the first one is that wound care disease state. So that's more of your clinical training. And when I say clinical training, I'm not talking about like really going into depth about like how to assess a wound or how to like put on a dressing or to determine what products should be used or anything like that. But they have to have enough of a familiarity with the different types of wounds and how to read an assessment. That is critical. When we talked about the LCD and the policy article and all the criteria that's required to ensure that that particular dressing, that treatment matches what it states in the assessment for reimbursement. Like that's why this particular training is so important, just to have that base level. It's also important too, because you're going to be talking with clinicians all the time in the surgical dressing space, more so than I feel like in other product categories.
Yeah.
And so it's important that you're talking the same language. So understanding the words, understanding the terminology is critical. So that's the first focus area.
Okay.
And I think that makes sense. And again,
it does.
Everybody needs it.
And I have to interject a little bit here. You are all the listeners are in a perfect position, because VGM, we have all the tools and resources for you to be educated in that disease state management sector. So first of all, we have the wound care manual that's available to all you on the members only portal. So maybe I'm jumping ahead, Amanda, but I just wanted to interject that in there before I forgot to let them know for education wise, we have that. So, okay, back to you.
All right. No, and I think that was perfect, because I mean, you don't have to like create, again, we always talk about, last session we talked a lot about like finding the right partners and not recreating the wheel. Like you don't have to write your own wound care disease state training. That's where you rely on VGM. You rely on your manufacturing partners, your distribution partners. You rely on others to help add that piece to your training. So again, it shouldn't be a heavy lift. It's just a matter of making sure that everyone is trained on it. The second key focus area, again, that everybody should have is, and this one I think makes sense, this is the surgical dressing program and the product category training. So this is like your core reimbursement training. So this is where you really basically are walking through the LCD and the policy article. You're walking through the different product categories and going over for each of those product categories. What are the requirements for reimbursement? What are you accepting as requirements for reimbursement for those particular product categories? What are the allowables? What are the contraindications? You're going through all of that. Again, now this is something that you can rely on others, partners that can help you with this particular training. Definitely it's something that you want to be involved in and developing that training, because there are some areas that are a little bit gray. Even though we don't like gray in the reimbursement world, there's sometimes where you might say, okay, well, in this situation, we will cover this. In this situation, we won't. There's just there's some gray areas. So it makes sense for you to sit down and really be involved in like how you want your team trained in and how you guys are going to respond as a business to those gray areas. But I think that that's really the second key focus area. The third key focus area is really where I start thinking about like your referral and your patient engagement training. And so this is where I feel like people break off into different tracks. So depending on what your role is within the organization, within that HME provider, is going to be dependent on what your training looks like in this specific instance. So our sales and marketing, they're going to have a different type of training than, let's say, our resupply coordinators. Some of it's going to overlap and be the same, but some of it's going to be very different because we're going to have resupply coordinators that are on the phone speaking with clinicians about alternate options to treatments when the ones that they selected initially aren't reimbursed, and if there's missing documentation and things of that sort. Much different conversation than your sales and marketing team that's going out to the referral sources and actually talking to those referrals and trying to get that business. So this is where your tracks kind of break off and become a little bit different, is in that third focus area.
Very good point. And with the clinical and the sales, again, you can rely on, like Amanda said, you can rely on your vendor partners and VGM. And as you're talking about this, one thing that comes to my mind is, I still have to go back and look at my cheat sheet. So a word to the wise, this is an ongoing process and something that you're not going to learn overnight. This is something that I still have to go back and look at my notes. And I get a question. Last week, I got it on tape. I had to go back to the LCD and the policy to check. So it's okay to say, that's a great question. Let me get back to you, whether you're talking to a clinician or if you're talking to the referral source. So great, very great point. And I never really thought about that. It is a separate conversation between sales and clinical. So thanks for bringing that up.
The other thing too, you brought up the cheat sheet.
Oh, okay, yep.
I am a huge fan of cheat sheets. So I know when we do our surgical dressing boot camp, one of the things that we do when we go over that product training is that we provided them with a grid. And that grid, as we walk through each of the product categories, they would complete the grid. And basically what we were doing during that is that we were building. When I first got started in the surgical dressing space, especially when I was in the long-term care facilities and I was sitting there with the nurse, so we had a different kind of model. Like, not only was I the sales rep, but I was also taking orders at the same time. So I had to make sure that I understood all the little nuances. And I worked with my cheat sheet. Like, I had it in front of me, and I did not apologize for the fact that I had it in front of me, because that was the best way for me to learn. So I'm a huge fan of folks using cheat sheets just because it helps you to learn. And I also like creating your own cheat sheet, because I know if I write something down, it helps me to remember. But yeah,
good point.
Can't emphasize enough how much of a valuable tool that can be.
Absolutely. Do you have a fourth one for the education? You have disease state, product category, training, referral, and patient engagement. So those are the three. Okay. I think it is too. Yep. That's great though. That covers all the bases. So when you said that you were sitting next to when you're in the long-term care facility, you were taking the orders and also kind of educating and doing everything in all at once. Now, I know I love this tagline of yours, is you tell and train teams to be order makers, not order takers. So what do you mean by that, in being order makers, not takers?
Yeah. Okay. So and one of my pet peeves, whenever I see like a sales rep or hear a resupply person that's working with an HME provider, or they're working with a referral source, they take the order. So if the order doesn't match what it needs to, that's it. We can't accept the order. They don't provide any alternatives to them. And so that's what I mean by an order maker and not just an order taker. So somebody that's just going to take in the order, they're not going to give any kind of feedback as to why something's not reimbursable or provide any alternative options that would be reimbursable. And that's not what a good HME provider partner does for a referral. So an order maker is somebody that's going to take that in. They're going to see that, hey, this doesn't match, so we can't reimburse in this particular situation, but they're going to tell them why. And then they're also going to turn around and give them options. And that's what I mean by an order maker and not an order taker. On the same note, as well, is there are things that are not reimbursable that also can help with that patient's outcome in that with that particular wound, whether it's a wound cleanser or adhesive remover, whatever the case may be, that could also help that patient. Like offering up those items as well too, even though they're not reimbursable and they're a retail component, that is an order taker and not an order maker. I like to call that up caring, because
Yes.
the patients don't know what they need. They don't know what's available. They don't know what their options are. And in many cases, they're willing to pay a little bit for those not reimbursable supplies if they know that it's going to help the outcome that they're trying to achieve. And so it's just a matter of making sure that you're giving them all of their options. So that's a big part of training, is teaching your staff how to be those order makers and not just the order takers, and also instilling that up caring in them as well too.
Good point. That I love the up caring, because you don't know what you don't know. I always translate it or kind of
Mm-hmm.
compare it to my mother-in-law had a knee done, and I didn't know I'm in the HME industry, and I didn't know everything that she needed at home until it happened. So they don't know. In wound care, you don't know
Yep.
what you don't have, and then you're telling everyone to run to the corner pharmacy to get this and gauze and saline, and so to let them know and educate them up front that, hey, you patient might also need these extra supplies. Or to the clinical, have you talked to your patient about maybe needing these? So really, really, really great point. Anything else that you want to add to that in regards to, again, on that part, lean on your manufacturers, your distribution partners, and VGM on the education and the tools and resources that can be provided? All right. What about, okay, big question. What makes a successful training program for your staff? Loaded question.
There's a lot of things. One, it's got to be thorough and it's got to be ongoing. So I always like training to build on itself. So one of the things that I think about is that some people think of training as a one and done. Like you get a new employee, you train them, and then that's it. But you should always be going back and doing refresher training. And then you should also add on to what they already know. When we think about employee retention, one reason why folks leave is because they get bored. Things get monotonous. It gets stale. They're not learning anything new. They're not being stimulated. So adding to it, like once you've got somebody that's learned, they've done well with already just the basics, add to that. Teach them about other things like support services, negative pressure. Like there's other things that you can be talking about that you can introduce to your team to help them have even further conversations with their referral sources. So I think that to me is a successful training, as long as it's building on. I think too, also making sure that within your training, you're focusing on your value props as an HME provider. That is really, really important. And in all actuality, one of your value props itself is just the fact that you have a knowledgeable team of reimbursement experts that you have been training. I think that is a huge value prop within itself. And so making sure that your referral sources understand the emphasis and the time that you put into training your team so that they are those reimbursement experts. I think that is also another key that really shows me that you've got a successful training program.
Absolutely. I would agree 100%. And building on, that's a great point, because you and I, we still are learning. We learn every day. If something changes, we're learning what changes in the LCD and the medical policy, or the new dressings that come out. We're learning about that. Something that trends out in the marketplace, we're learning about that. So that's a really great key. And then also, I wanted to add on to when you said, you can educate them on therapeutic support services, negative pressure wound therapy, compression's another one. Nutrition should be educated in every outlet of wound care, just because you need the added intake of the proper nutrition for the wound to heal. It's a marathon, not a sprint, when we're journeying through this wound care space. So that's a really great point. And then for value proposition, I would agree with you. The knowledgeable staff That is what the referral sources are going to look for, because they want to partner with somebody that knows what they're doing. And that's going to take care of their
Yep.
patient. So very, very, very good point on that. So good point. See, this is also, I'm learning from Amanda too. It's picking up cues. She's yeah, you are, because you forget about this stuff, and it's like, yes, that does count. That does matter. Yeah, we need to do that. Or it reinforces everything that I'm saying, that I'm talking to VGM members about. That said, yeah, that's right. Okay, good. I got a little more concrete there, that I am saying the right thing in regards to what you just what you just went over. So thank you so much. So all
It kind
right,
of makes me miss it. I kind of want to do it again.
let's do it. Let's do it. Oh, that's funny.
All right, quit VGM McKesson. We're going to start our own DME.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Hey, this is what it's all about.
Entail.
We hope we are re-energizing you too, you listeners out there. So you're like, get ready to go, ready to train, ready to educate your staff, put out your value prop. That's awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, we hope you learned a little bit today about training your staff and the education and the tools and resources that you have out there that are available to you as a partner, that you should be taking advantage of if you're not. So that is the training your staff. So thank you so much for joining us on episode 4. We will be back with episode 5 talking about external training, correct?
Yep.
Go to market
and building
strategy.
that go-to-market strategy.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Thank you, everybody from Industry Matters. And thank you, Amanda, so much, bringing your wonderful knowledge to all the listeners out there.